Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Napoleon Toll, and today we're back with another video, and this time we're going to be doing Shogun 2. It's been a while since I've been doing anything regarding Shogun 2, and that is because, as some of you might have known, my Shogun 2 crashed, and for others who don't know, well, now you know. But for those who don't know what Shogun 2 is, it is a real-time strategy game made by Total War, which is a company that focuses on strategy games, and Shogun 2, in this particular case, sets during the time of the Sengoku Jidai, and in my case, because I have the Fall of the Samurai pack, it is set during the end of the Tokugawa Shogunate, or in other words, the beginning of the Boshin War, with start date of 1864. The reason why I like Shogun 2 so much is because of a lot of things. One, it allows you to build up your armies, and two, allows you to fight your armies in real time, while also having the impact to do strategic and even tactical decisions. But that said, that is my rant on why I love Shogun 2 so much, and with Total War releasing a new Total War Pharaoh, I am more than interested to see if I can get my hands on it, but you know my financial situation and I'm quite poor, so that's gonna be something really hard. But that said, let's get back to Shogun 2. For this video, I am doing a lot of hot mods, and as of the time of recording this, I can't access those mods, but somehow, for some reason, I can still use them, and that's probably because Shogun 2 has been updated, which means that a lot of things have changed, in the sense that graphics have been updated. But at the same time, now that I can't even see my mod generator, I can only tell you the mods that I use. The first one that I have is the low cost reduction. This decreases the unit cost of most units, and especially ships, which is a hell lot. I also have the Total Thoughts tactical uniforms, and basically what it does, it gives a lot of tactics and uniforms to the dudes. Low income, extra low income, which increases the income by a slight amount, which is also very useful because Shogun 2 is notorious, in my opinion, for having low income, at least compared to games like Three Kingdoms and Rome 2. And we have the Radius Total Thoughts Unit Mod 3, which increases a hell lot of new units to the regular Shogun 2, and that is kind of the reason why I've been interested in Shogun 2 these past few days, because the Radius mods add a hell of a lot of new units, which is amazing. And finally, we have the Strong General skills, which is also quite amazing in the sense that it just gives you a lot of new skills for, well, it gives you the ability to level up your generals faster, which, although not the most groundbreaking thing, it is very important if you want to do well with your generals, and considering the fact that they can be assassinated by a single ninja, then this skill is kind of important for the late game to ensure that you have a lot of generals rolling around. That said, that's all it for this intro. If you haven't liked, subscribe, or joined the Discord, highly suggest that you do. But that said, let's get started with the Aizu campaign, which, by the way, has a lot of unique buffs, one of which the most important are -10 traditional units and -10 to Shinsengumi units. And for those who don't know Japanese history, traditional units are essentially samurai, and during this time, because it's 1864, you have a lot of Western looking units, which are going to be a problem. On the other hand, Shinsengumi are essentially the Shoguns, and not to be confused with the Emperor, the Shogun's special agents, which come very handy. And in this entire campaign, I'll be focusing on a traditional campaign in the sense that I'll be deploying a lot of samurai, or in this case, Kachi units. But that said, let's officially get onto the campaign map. Here we are on the starting map, and as you can see, I am at Fukushima, which is controlled by the Aizu, which is almost their historical homeland. And of course, the first starting moves is to build up my economy, which is I build a lot of new buildings, which are amazing. Of course, I keep doing that, and I'm also trying to move my army south, because our first initial dilemma is to invade the south. And the reasons why I do that is because that country, or that faction, or that clan, whatever you might want to call it, is at war with us. And although their power is relatively equal, I have more than confident that I could kill them. And because of that, I have a turn system, which means that I'm just gonna wait, and I'm just gonna wait. Basically, my logic to this is that I'm just gonna wait them out and wait for the opportunity, which is something although I don't like to do at the early game, is something that is quite interesting. But that said, I keep continue building up units, and I keep building up my farms, which are the main source of infrastructure. Now, as you can see, this is the Shinsengumi, and first thing I like to do with the Shinsengumi is to move them around and scout what the heck is going on. And in this case, the enemy just sallied out with their army and just stood their ground on the outside, and I just killed their leader, which is interesting, because with their general dead, I have an easier time, but they instantly spawn in another general, and what I'm gonna do after winter is over is I'm just gonna attack it with essentially an army and incite a revolt. What this does is the opening is given, which means the enemy army is moving away, which allows me to essentially sweep in with my armies. Literally, within the first few seconds of this start, you will see me essentially using the Shinzengumi to essentially scare away the enemy army by setting a revolt, having the enemy army essentially fight that revolt, and me just coming in, storming it in, and taking their province, or should I say their castles. And just to give you a wonder where they are, they're right here. And of course I can do a lot of things with that army, but the most notably is getting them away from their city, which I do, and I instantly take their city on quite literally a few turns in, which is amazing if you ask me. So it's essentially with cost of very little death, which is what I really want in this campaign, I essentially took my first province, which is amazing. Of course, I'm also moving armies to garrison that province, and of course the enemy is going to be angry and it's going to be attacking currently mine new province. And essentially what they're going to be doing is they're going to be raiding up and down. And just to give you interesting note, I can obviously assassinate their generals again and again, but they still do have a very interesting army, and that is going to be something hard to deal with. Of course, there's another thing about the Shinzengumi, which is chorus troops, which some of those troops can join you, but I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm just going to send my army in to crush them. And I made a mistake in the sense that my army, although not the best, is kind of small, and as you can see instantly, if my army gets too big, they'll just retreat. But interesting thing about my army is that my army is also needed for garrison duty, and what troops I can pull off, it is going to be a Pyrrhic victory even if I can win. And if I can't, then I lose the entire army. Well, sort of. But at the same time, I decided to back off and just wait for the next turn, and at the same time recruit a lot of units. Now, a lot of interesting thing about this mod is that some of these units, although look original and are essentially units that I would not recommend during a normal campaign, these are very good for the mods that I'm using, and for reasons why I'll tell you once we get to the battlefield. But once we've taken this city, I am expanding east, west, and south, essentially down south, and basically what I want to do is to essentially take out the Josei, but I have to be mindful of my neighbors, which are the Numata and the Edo, which are going to be a little bit scary to deal with if I have them at my back. And my first thing is to make sure they're not going to be killing me when I march on the Josei. So that's going to be interesting. Of course, I'm going to send spies to look at what's going on, and I'm just going to end the turn. In which this time, the enemy army, which I've taken their province of, is just going to be attacking me, and instantly they regret it because they absolutely get clobbered because they're assaulting the city that I took, well, which is their former city, but I literally used the defenses of my city to clobber them. I'm gonna auto-resolve it, and their army is completely destroyed, so I don't have to worry about another insurgency, or should I say another raid against my farmlands. On the other hand, I'm just going to incite a rebellion, which is the exact same thing that I did for the Josei, or should I say my former created province, or should I say my former annexed province, whatever you would like to call it, and instantly the Josei are going to have rebellion. The thing that I instantly regretted after that was that they get free reign to attack your generals, or should I say my generals. Also, with the rebellion created, it's kind of interesting to see how they will deal with it, but within the first few seconds they crushed it, which is something to be expected. And although I don't really like it, I did realize after I essentially started revolt, my general died, and that was because an enemy ninja or an assassin was there to kill me, which instantly pissed me off. So the only sensible thing I'm gonna do is to kill that ninja, and obviously I will also kill their entire faction with it because now I am purely angry. You don't just kill one of my generals and proceed to get away with it. No, you will pay the consequences. And the first thing I do is have my Shinzengumi agents kill them, and kill them they do. With their enemy assassinated, I'm prepared to move on to the enemy territory, which I do need a lot of good things to do and the right situation. So as of right now, I'm still gonna wait And with my stuff ready, I am ready to get rolling. And as you can see, I just checked to make sure my general has been actually assassinated, which has been confirmed, meaning that he will not be spawning back at all, so that's going to be very unfortunate. But with a new rebellion created by my Shinsengumi agents, the enemy army essentially will be sallying out to deal with that, and now I think it's the best time to deal with the Josei. First thing I do is to set a peace and order the Edo to break their alliance, and then I'm going to march on their city. And the Edo is actually going to join me, but I'm not going to call them to assist because I want their lands, well, all of Josei's lands, and I don't want the Edo to be taking stuff. For some context, the Edo is the home of the Shogun as of right now, so essentially if I, by any chance in the future, attack Edo, which I might as well, I will be going to war with the Shogun himself, but not everyone else. But that said, let's move on to things at hand, which is destroying the Josei, which I almost instantly do. They have an enemy army outside their gates, and because they were dealing with a rebellion that I sponsored, I'm just gonna just cut them off from their city, reinforcement range in terms of how they can move to their city, and then I'm just gonna clobber them, well, clobber the city that I just took. And what I'm going to do now is going to kill their generals, which is very, very important because I don't like them at all. I want them dead because they killed one of my generals and I only see fit to assassinate some of theirs. And at this point, I'm just going to keep assassinating their generals. But before I do, I'm just going to increase my Shinsengumi, which is going to help him kill more generals. And at this point, I'm just going to kill another general, which I hope it does. And it doesn't, but thankfully I have another Shinsengumi agent. As you can see, this entire campaign is me just trying to kill enemy generals and using the utmost stuff to get my way. And that is literally anything in the handbook, in and out the Book of War. Of course, I'm just going to keep moving on because that enemy army as of right now is essentially trapped in my territory, but I will keep an eye on it because I need to sabotage the enemy army just to make sure it doesn't move this turn. So I'm going to do that, but before I do that, I'm just going to move my Shinsengumi away so I can actually sabotage the enemy army, and once it's sabotaged, which it doesn't, we have a problem. Now, I'm going to do another thing, which is coerce the troops under the enemy, and this is what happens when you coerce troops. The enemy army joins you, quite literally, and this gives me a lot more troops to work with to deal with the enemy. And as of right now, their enemy is, the Josei to be exact, is looking in a very precarious situation. Another thing that I do is increase my army, which is very important. And in the next turn, we essentially continue the march on the Josei. And they have an army, but I really doubt that army is even useful. Heck, I'm not even considering it as a full army because their army in the north is basically cut off. And although it's trying to take some of my northern cities, it's not doing so hot. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just trying to save up money so I can coerce them so some of their troops can join. But as of right now, I'm going to sabotage their army, disallowing them to move, which as of right now, although the enemy army is leaderless, it is still a very powerful threat, so I'm going to make sure it does not have an opportunity to become a threat by making them, or essentially not allowing them to move. On the other hand, more troops are going to be deployed south, so I'm just going to steamroll the Josei once and for all, which is amazing considering the fact that it's only been a few turns in. I'm rolling one of the biggest powerful players or factions in the game, at least in the area I'm in. But that said, I'm going to be increasing the troop number and wait for the turn, which is right now, and I'm going to be marching on their capital. Well, actually not their capital, it's one of the provinces that they took, but I'm just not going to siege it out yet. I'm going to have two armies siege it out, and instantly I order the assault because I'm more than confident I can take the place. The enemy city is basically a very wooden place, and of course my army is completely massive, which I can just deploy en masse. On the other side, the entire army that I have is mostly traditional units, which I expected. As I said with the start of the game, I'm using traditional units. Almost all of them are traditional units. I only have one Shinsengumi unit, which is a musket unit, so that's going to be interesting. But my army is massive. And the first thing that the enemy has, which they do have, is their naval bombardment, which, although not impressive, is able to scare off some of my troops, but because I'm able to pay attention and keep concentrating on where the enemy naval bombardment is, I'm just able to move my troops around to make sure they not get hit with the enemy artillery bombardment, or should I say naval bombardment in this case. And that is a very interesting thing about Shogun 2, is that you can order a naval bombardment at least in Fall of the Samurai, so that's going to be very interesting. While you're doing that, the unit textures has also been changed, meaning that some of these guys are going to be looking completely different from the vanilla Shogun 2 Fall of the Samurai. But at this point, I am going to be storming into the castle with my army from a place that they were not expecting. And the first thing I did was, after I stormed in, was form up into a Yari wall, which is essentially the Yari wall in regular Shogun 2, which has a bunch of spears pointing at you. And the first thing that charges to confront me is literally horses, which is a problem because horses are worse against guys holding spears. So that is going to be an issue, and more horses are going to be piled in, but as soon as more horses are piled in, the enemy infantry move. But because I'm in Yari Wall and my troops are significantly better, I do a much better job than them, and I clobber their way through. Although my troops, some of my units are taking horrendous casualties because, let's give or take, the enemy is defending, and I'm going to be attacking. On the other hand, I do kill one of the enemy generals, which is very interesting. And this is very interesting because my guys are just pointing their sticks, and they're instantly getting dismounted or killed, which is very, very interesting. Eventually, the enemy is fighting, literally being pushed into a semicircle, and what I do after that is to close the gaps and then switch them in and kill them all, which is very, very cool. Essentially, this battle has been won before I've even ended it, and this disaster is only beginning for the Josei, because very, very soon their clan is going to end, as long with the people who support them. But I do take some casualties, like I said, although we win a hugely decisive victory. So I keep their province and I capture it, and the enemy army is once again running around for doing I don't know what. And that's going to be very sad, but I do have enough money now to course their army, and this is what happens. Half of the enemy army joins me, which is very, very impressive. On the other hand, I'm just going to deploy all my troops within the vicinity to counter that very depleted enemy army, and I'm going to once again increase the army, or army size, in the newly captured province, and I'm going to march on Josei's final city, their capital essentially. And although I expect a quick victory because of the size of my army and the size of theirs, they do have walls, which is very scary, and because of most of my units are traditional and most of their army defending is essentially Western units, I have a hard time, so I'm going to siege it out. But at the same time, the enemy also attacks, which forces me on the defensive in the north, which that army with half size, which I've taken away, is going to be attacking me. So essentially, this is the army that I essentially use my agents on to dwindle out to half size, and the rest of the troops join me, so that's very troublesome for them. But they're going to be attacking my settlement, which looks at this right now very promising, because they were able to storm not only through the first keep, which is only the thing, they were also about to take the capture point if it were not for my veteran units holding the line. But at this point, most of my veteran units, there's not a lot, and the enemy troops in terms of quality are much, much better than me. And not to mention the fact that most of their troops are Western gun units, which means they can shoot me, but I'm using every advantage in the book of my guys to hold them back. But I can only hold them back for so long. The enemy eventually decisively wins a decisive victory, and I lose a province, but during the next turn, I literally deploy the army that essentially joined me after they deserted them, and I siege them out, and have another army essentially crush them, which this is able to be done. The good thing about this entire situation is the fact that one of my generals, well, one of the guys who were at the battle becomes a general, which is something that I really, really need, because I need more generals, because I need more troops, and because I need more troops, I'm gonna need more dudes. But that said, that is all it for this video. In the next episode, we are going to be marching on Edo. But that said, this is a very good start. I wasn't even expecting such a good start. But that said, have a great day, guys. I'll see you in the next one.